Uh, Good afternoon. Sound आइरहेछ साउन्ड आइरहेछ
Yes, sir.
I'm audible. Slide आइरहेछ नि हैन. So now today's lecture we are starting with tuberculosis. Right? So tuberculosis will complete in two lectures. So two lectures because we have to mainly concentrate on the new TB guidelines and then the treatment of MDRA. So we are completing on two lectures today and the next Tuesday. So it's fine. So starting with the case scenario. So this is 45 years old male who presented with a complaint of cough for 4 weeks. The fever is low grade. Okay, so evening rising temperature was there in this patient, and then a history of occasional hemoptysis is there. Occasional hemoptysis is there. And then loss of weight, loss of appetite is there, and patient is smoker, is alcoholic and also a diabetic. Okay, so the patient is also immunocompromised, and then patient has also a risk factor of smoking, and all these contributing on this patient. And so in this patient, and on examination, the BMI is 16 kg per meter square. So patient is underweight. And on chest, the bilateral vesicular breast sound with crepitations, which is present on the left infraclavicular area. Okay, so it's comprising of the left upper lobe on the examination, and CVS is normal, and the upper abdomen is normal finding. So this is the presentation the patient can present with you with a pulmonary tuberculosis. Like features. Okay, so it's features. So starting with this case scenario, the tuberculosis. So we are going to cover up the contents of the lecture is to introduction and the mode of transmission, pathogenesis, natural history, what are the risk factors, clinical features, investigation, and the treatment. On treatment, we will going for the new and revised NTP guidelines. Okay, so NTP guidelines, which has been revised recently. Then coming to the introduction, the tuberculosis remains a major public health problem in Nepal and one of the leading cause of death from the communicable disease among adults. Okay, so adults in 2017 to 18, a total of 32,474 cases of TB were notified and registered at National Tuberculosis Program, and TB case notification as well as the estimated incidence has been stagnant for more than a decade now in Nepal, around 152 per 1 lakh population in 2018. Okay, so, and then it is estimated that about 5,000 to 7,000 people die from the TB every year because of TB and because of its complications and the residual tuberculosis. Okay, so complications. The proportion of the MDR TB was 2.2%. So we are mainly concerned now because of the MDR. So the MDR is on the rising, and also we are getting the patient of extremely drug resistant tuberculosis, XTR. So 2.2% among new cases and 15.4% among the retreatment cases. So it's very high. So in the retreatment cases, we are getting so much of high patient of MDR TB. So that's why the treatment protocol and all the protocol has been slightly revised. Looking into this. On a DRS survey carried out in 2011 and 12, and another DRS survey is planned to be carried out in 2020, but because of the COVID, so it is slightly becoming late. And the TB HIV co-infection rate in Nepal is 1.1%. So HIV among the TB and 8.5% among TB among the HIV. Okay, on the patient. So there is high prevalence of the HIV and TB co-infection is there. So this is the another vast topic that has to be, we are going. We have to deal with HIV and TB co-infection. So HIV testing among TB patients are also improving. So that's why we have to test for the HIV in the patient who has been diagnosed of tuberculosis if the history is suggestive on that. Okay, so it's better to look whether there is a co-infection or not. Then coming to the basics of tuberculosis. So TB is a bacterial disease which is caused by the Mycobacterium tuberculosis and occasionally by Mycobacterium bovis and Mycobacterium africanum. So these are the other variant and species. So these organisms are known as a tubercular bacilli because they cause lesions called tubercles or as acid-fast bacilli. Okay, so when examining the sputum containing the tubercular bacilli, as we know the principle of Jerenstein, with certain dyes under the microscope, and the bacilli is looking red. So this is because they are acid fast. So they have kept the dye even after the washing with the acid and alcohol. So tubercular bacilli can remain dormant the tissue and persist for many years. So that's why there is always a high chance of a reactivation of tuberculosis where you are immunocompromised. Okay, so there is a there's another term known as a reactivation of tuberculosis anytime. So this is how you are going to look for the tuberculosis on the microscope, and this is in the electron microscope. Acid-fast bacilli. So transmission occurs through mainly airborne spread of the infectious droplets. Source of the infection is a person with a TB of the lung who is expectorating the bacilli. Coughing produces tiny infectious droplets, that is droplet nuclei. One cough can produce around 3,000 droplet nuclei. So transmission generally occurs indoors where the droplet nuclei can stay in the air for a long time. Okay, and ventilation removes the droplet nuclei. So direct sunlight quickly kills the tubercular bacilli. So sunlight, always advised to have a good sunlight on the room, but they can survive in the dark for several hours. Okay, so they can survive in the dark for several hours. And two factors which is mainly determine the individual risk of exposure: the concentration of the droplet nuclei in the contaminated air and the length of the time of breathing that air. Okay, so now because of we are using a lot of masks and all these things, so we are now getting a less amount of tuberculosis within these years. Okay, so because of might be because of the masking or because of the underdiagnosed thing might be there. So we are going to come out with a certain picture within a days to come. Okay, so now because of the masking and because of social distancing also, we are getting less amount of the patient with tuberculosis. So how the TB spreads is the same thing. Okay, so overcrowding. So overcrowding is there. So now because of all the social distancing and all because of the COVID, so we are worried about COVID, but the tuberculosis is another killer. Okay, so it's a silent killer. So if you acquire tuberculosis, your lungs is going to be damaged in the form of any sequelae. Okay, so that will come on the coming slides. So what are the factors which increase the risk of tuberculosis? So this is the box which is given in your Davidson. While taking the history of the patient and you are suspecting of tuberculosis, so you should also take the history of these risk factors of the tuberculosis. Okay, so yes, is more children and the young adults and the elderly is morely common in the elderly, and the first generation immigrants from the high prevalence countries, so like Nepal or Southeast Asia or any underdeveloped countries is a high prevalence countries, and the close contacts of the patient with a smear positive pulmonary tuberculosis. And if the person has a history of overcrowding, if the patient is living in the prisons, collective dormitories, homelessness, okay, so and then those houses and the hostels, the patient person is living on that, and the patient has a history, reveals the previous history, chest X-ray showing the evidence of self-TB in the formation of fibrosis, even a form of calcified lymph node and all these things. So that might be also a risk factor of the reactivation on this group of patient. And the primary infection less than 1 year previously is another one, and the another is smoking, either it's in the form of the cigarettes or in the form of BDs. Okay, so that's the another risk factor. This is the patient related risk factors. While as the associated disease, if the patient is immunocompromised, if the patient is in immunosuppression because of HIV, if the patient is taking TNF, anti-tumor necrosis factor TNF therapy for the rheumatoid arthritis and other skin or conditions, in this the patient is having a high chance of having immunosuppression. If the patient in the high dose corticosteroids, if the patient is on the chemotherapeutic agents, that is cytotoxic agents, are more likely to have to immunosuppression and having a high chance of acquiring the tuberculosis. Whereas in the malignancy, so especially a lymphoma and leukemia, and then the patient has a history of diabetes, so more patient of the diabetes in the most of the patient, we are getting a lot of patient of having a tuberculosis. Okay, and in the case of CKD, so a lot of patient around, most likely around the 20 to 30% of the patient of the CKD might develop the tuberculosis. Okay, so because of the immunosuppression. And the another one is silicosis, that occupational lung disease, in which there is a lot of silica, it's just like stone grinding factories, the marble cutting factories, in the cement factories, they are more likely to have a silicosis. So the patient can have a high chance of developing a tuberculosis that is known as a silicotuberculosis. Okay, so silicotuberculosis will be there. And then the another is a gastrointestinal disease associated with the malnutrition. So gastrectomy, if the patient has gone for general ileal bypass, cancer of the pancreas, and malabsorption syndrome. And now the deficiency of vitamin D and A also has a high predilection to develop the tuberculosis. Okay, and the patient and the children of having a history of recent measles in children. So these are the factors increasing the risk of tuberculosis. Okay, so we have to inquire about these risk factors in the patient. Then coming to the pathogenesis of tuberculosis, so it's a primary infection which occurs on the first exposure to tuberculosis bacilli, as you know from the microbiology lectures and the pathology lectures. So inhaled droplets nuclei are so small that they avoid the mainly a mucocellular defense of the bronchi and lodge in the terminal alveoli of the lungs. So infection begin with the multiplication of the tubercular bacilli in the lungs, and this is known as a Ghon focus. And the lymphatic system directs the bacilli from to the higher lymph nodes, and the Ghon focus and the related higher lymph node is known as a primary complex. So bacilli may spread in the blood from the primary complex throughout the body, causing the dissemination. And the immune response, that is delayed hypersensitivity and cellular immunity, develops about 4 to 2 weeks after the primary infection. Okay, so and with this, so either there can be healed or the patient can have a tubercular disease. So the outcome of the primary infection, mainly a primary complex, is if the patient can have no clinical disease, if the cell have disease, in which only we are going to get a positive tuberculin test, usual outcome in the over 90% of the cases. And then in the hypersensitivity reactions in the form of erythema nodosum. So this erythema nodosum is a nodular maculopapular rash, which is present on the scene of the tibia. Okay, so this erythema nodosum can be there. And there can be a flectenar conjunctivitis. So this is mainly a flecten in which there is a involvement of conjunctiva. So this flectenar conjunctivitis can be there. There can be an involvement of a small joint that is known as a dactylitis. Okay, so this is mainly a hypersensitivity reaction to the tuberculosis. And then the another is the pulmonary and the pleural complication that can be a tuberculosis pneumonia. There can be a lobar collapse because of the bronchial compression with the enlarged lymph nodes. And there can be a pleural disease in which there is a formation of pleural effusion. And another is a disseminated disease. The patient can have a lymphadenopathy, usually mainly involving the cervical. There can be a meningitis, there can be a pericarditis, and there can be a miliary disease. Okay, so miliary disease. So these are the mainly the outcome of the primary infection. So most of the cases is landing on this, and the another group of patient will land on this group of conditions. So outcome. And what is the post-primary TB? So is a pulmonary TB can be remain as cavities. It can form as upper lobe infiltrates. So there can be a fibrosis. There can be a progressive pneumonia. There can be a endobronchial growth. Okay, so endobronchial growth, and the extrapulmonary TB. Can be the most common is a pleural effusion. So there can be a lymphadenopathy. So it's mainly usually cervical lymphadenopathy. There can be a central nervous system involvement in which the patient can have a meningitis. There can be a cerebral tuberculoma. Okay, so tuberculoma can be there. In the pericarditis, the patient can have a pericardial effusion, or there can be a patient with a effusion which is become fibrous that lead into constrictive pericarditis. And the another is a gastrointestinal. So the mainly it can be a ileocecal tuberculosis, or it can be a peritoneal tuberculosis. And then the spine and other bone and joint can be also involved. So less common with a pleural effusion, there is a pus, so there can be a formation of empyema. And there can be an involvement of male genital tract. The patient can present with epididymitis or orchitis. In female genital tract, if the patient can present with infertility, the patient can have a tubular mass, and that might be an endometrial tuberculosis. And the kidneys can be involved, so that is a renal tuberculosis, and the adrenal gland can be involved, in which the patient can go into Addison crisis. And then the skin, the patient can have a lupus pulchritis, tuberculitis, and then there can be a military tuberculosis. So all these are the extrapulmonary tuberculosis. Okay, so pleural effusion will be on the extrapulmonary, while as if the lung parenchyma is involved, that is known as a pulmonary tuberculosis. So coming to the natural history of untreated tuberculosis, if we are not going to treat the tuberculosis, what will be the natural history? Okay, so this is also a box. This is known as a Wallerton classification of the tuberculosis. So this is also given in your Davidson. So time from the infection, if it is 3 to 8 weeks, there will be a formation of primary complex. The patient can have a positive tuberculosis skin test in this 3 to 8 weeks of infection. And if it is 3 to 6 months of the infection, the patient can have develop into a meningeal, miliary, and pylori disease. So up to 3 years, the patient can have a gastrointestinal, bone and joint and lymph node disease. So if we are finding a lymph node tuberculosis, then we can think the patient might have infected 3 years back. Okay, and then around 8 years only the patient can have a renal tract disease. So it's mainly the renal tuberculosis. And then from 3 years onwards, it can be a post-primary disease due to reactivation or reinfection. Okay, we can think about. So this is how the untreated tuberculosis can land up. So coming to the pulmonary tuberculosis, so what are the symptoms that patient can present? The cardinal symptoms the patient can present if we are going to suspect if the patient has a cough for more than 2 weeks and the sputum production and the weight loss, and there might be a history of hemoptysis, chest pain, and breathlessness, and the constitutional symptoms like fever, night sweats, tiredness, and loss of appetite. So these are the symptoms of the pulmonary tuberculosis. So what is the new changes that come out for the diagnosis of tuberculosis, pulmonary tuberculosis, that now previously we used to send the 3 samples. Now only the 2 sputum samples is required for the initial diagnosis of tuberculosis, and same day diagnosis of TB by microscopy, that is 2 samples. Same day, 1 hour apart is the diagnostic change that has come out with the new National Tuberculosis Program guideline. Only 1 sputum sample is required for the follow-up examination. Previously we used to do the 2 sputum sample required for the follow-up examination at the 2 months and at the end of 5 months of the treatment. So even new or presumptive TB cases should be have access to the GeneXpert diagnosis wherever possible. So now this has also added is the GeneXpert. So if you are strongly suspecting of the tuberculosis and you are getting 2 negative TB microscopic tests, we can send the patient for the GeneXpert for the presumptive diagnosis of tuberculosis. Okay, so GeneXpert is a type of PCR. Now coming to the tuberculosis lymphadenopathy, the lymph nodes most commonly involved are the cervical lymph nodes. The usual course of the lymph node disease is as follows. So there will be a form is the firm discrete nodes, okay, and the fluctuation nodes matted together, and there will be a skin breakdown, and there might be abscess formation and chronic sinuses, and it might heal with scarring. Okay, so this is the stages of the commonly the lymphadenopathy. So most common lymph node involved is the cervical lymphadenopathy in case of tuberculosis lymphadenopathy. So how to approach or investigate the lymphadenopathy is we are going to do the needle aspiration of the lymph node. So look for the material aspirated. If there is a causation, then we have to think about the tuberculosis. Smear for AFP present is TB, and smear for cytology malignant cell seen. So then it can be malignancy. So it can be a Kaposi sarcoma, it can be a lymphoma or any other carcinoma which has been metastasis. And if no diagnosis after the aspirate and is very confusing, then it's an indication to go for the lymph node biopsy. Okay, so lymph node biopsy, in that if the causation necrosis is there, AFV was seen, then the positive TB culture that we can send for the TB culture, and the histology if the granuloma is present and FV is present, then we can diagnose of TB. If there is a malignant cell, we can go for the malignancy. So this is how you are going to work up for the lymphadenopathy. So what are the systemic manifestation of extrapulmonary tuberculosis? So it can involve from head to toe. If the patient presents with a headache, seizure, confusion, there can be a lymphocytic meningitis. So there can be a hydrocephalus because of the obstruction of the CSF flow. Okay, so there might be a obstructive or non-communicating hydrocephalus that can be present. The patient can present with that. The patient can present with a space occupying lesion, that is a cerebral tuberculoma. So patient can present with only with a seizure, or patient can present with any weakness of the upper and lower limb, that is known as a hemiparesis if there is a tuberculoma. Okay, so these are the features the patient can have if there is involvement. And the patient can also have involvement of cranial palsy. So sixth nerve cranial palsy is mainly common. So any cranial nerves can be involved. And then the patient can have a lymph node enlargement that you are going to look up. And then the patient can have the involvement of heart, that's pericardial effusion and constrictive pericarditis. Spine is mainly involved, so patient can present with a chronic back pain. And the examination, you can find the gibbus. Okay, so there's a prominent vertebra because of the fracture and all these things. Okay, so gibbus will be there. The patient can have a kyphosis. Patient can present with a cord compression because of the fracture. Okay, so and the patient can present with a weakness of the bilateral lower limb, that is known as a paraparesis. Okay, so the patient can on the abdomen, you can get the ascites because of the peritoneal environment, that can be a exudative ascites. And the patient can have a mesenteric adenitis. So mesenteric lymph node can be enlarged, so that the patient can have mesenteric lymphadenitis. And then the patient can have an intestinal obstruction because of the involvement of the ileocecal junction. Okay, so ileocecal junction involvement was there. Then the patient can present with a feature of intestinal obstruction, like vomiting, abdominal distension, and constipation. So these are the features of the abdominal tuberculosis. So there can be abdominal mass can be present in the ileocecal region. Okay, so ileocecal, and there can be a Schwartz sepsis, and then the hematuria, dysuria, infertility in women, epididymitis, and the patient can have an involvement of the joint. The patient can present with a monoarthritis, or it can be also because of the post-tubercular reactive arthritis, that known as a Ponson's disease, Ponson's arthritis, as a complication that will come on the chapter on the side of complications. And the patient can have anorectal ulcerations, and there can be ulcerations on that, so that can be just like an inflammatory bowel disease, like a Crohn's. So one of the differential diagnosis of anorectal ulceration is the tuberculosis, and the another is the Crohn's disease, so that we can have to differentiate. And then the general observation is a weight loss, fever, and night sweats. So these are the features the patient can have the extrapulmonary tuberculosis will going to get. So the another form is tuberculosis that we are going to encounter is a miliary tuberculosis. So miliary TB results from the widespread blood-borne dissemination of tuberculosis bacilli. So it is present with the constitutional features like hepatosplenomegaly, and on the fundoscopy examination, you can look for the choroidal tuberculosis tubercles on the retina. Okay, so you can look on this. So may be present. So chest X-ray shows diffuse, uniformly distributed, small miliary, millet seed-like pattern. Okay, so that you are going to see. So these are the CT scan where you can see the small dot like things. Okay, so involving all the long fields on the bilateral. So this is the picture that you are going to see in the miliary modeling. Okay, so that is known as a miliary modeling. And then the full blood count may show pancytopenia can be there. Liver function test may be abnormal. Bacteriological confirmation is sometimes possible from the sputum, CSF, or bone marrow, but mostly you have to do for the clinical diagnosis with the radiological diagnosis in case of miliary tuberculosis. So coming to the another one is pericardial tubercular effusion. Okay, so the another thing that you are going to encounter if the patient is having a you are going to get the pericardial effusion, then you have to think about the tuberculosis as a etiology in our condition, in our context. Okay, so cardiovascular symptoms: the patient can have a cough, patient can have a chest pain, shortness of breath. So patient can have a dizziness and the weakness because of the low cardiac output, because of the collection outside the pericardium, and then compressing the heart. So there can be a leg swelling, so right hypochondria because of liver congestion, and the patient can also have ascites. And the cardiovascular signs: the patient can have a tachycardia, low blood pressure. The pulsus paradoxus will be there whenever you measure the blood pressure on the inspiration and the expiration. So the systolic blood pressure difference you are going to get is more than 10 mmHg in the pulsus paradoxus, to say as a pulsus paradoxus. If the pulsus paradoxus is present, the patient is going into cardiac tamponade. So that's the medical emergency in which you have to do the pericardiocentesis. You have to drain the pericardial fluid. Okay, so then the patient can have a raised JVP with a small amplitude. As the patient has a collection outside the heart, so you can very difficult to palpate the apex beat. So there will be a muffled heart sound can be there. and the pericardial friction drop will be there, and features of the right-sided heart failure like hepatomegaly, ascites, and edema can be there. Okay, so these are the features of the right heart failure. So coming to the genitourinary tuberculosis, so what is the thing that you are going to find is the patient can present with a dysuria. There's a burning urine and difficult micturition, and patient have a increased frequency of micturition will be there. The patient can have a painless macroscopic hematuria can be there. There can be a low end pain. Patient can have a low grade fever, loss of weight, and patient have a chronic features of chronic urinary impairment. Example, polyuria or salt wasting can be present in general tuberculosis. There can be a bladder tuberculosis in which the patient can present with cystitis, nocturia, hematuria, pyuria, and dysuria. Okay, so these are the another features that we have to think about in the case of bladder tuberculosis. Then coming to the tuberculosis ascites, so ascites results from the peritoneal TB, which mainly routes of spread of TB to the peritoneum include the following routes from the tuberculous mesenteric lymph nodes, with the one route, and from the intestinal TB, that is pulmonary TB, may develop intestinal ulcers and fistulae as a result of swelling infected sputum, or it can be a bloodborne. Okay, so these are the routes of spreading to the peritoneum. So clinical features: the patient present with the constitutional features and the constitutional features like fever, loss of weight, loss of appetite, and all these things, and also the ascites. There may be a palpable abdominal mass can be there. So it's mainly because of the mesenteric lymph nodes. Adhesion of nodes to the bowel may cause bowel obstruction, and fistulae may develop between the bowel and bladder and the abdominal wall. Also, you can get the fistula. Okay, so fistula also is present in the anorectal region in the case of Crohn's also. So that's why we have to differentiate, because the Crohn's, you are giving the steroids and all these things, but in the if it is tuberculosis, that is going to flare up with the steroids. So that's why you have to be differentiate between the two one. And on the another form of the gastrointestinal tuberculosis, beside the peritoneal tuberculosis, is mainly that esophagus, stomach, duodenum, jejunum, ileum, ileocecal valve, cecum, ascending, transverse, and descending. All these are going to be affected for 50% of all the gastrointestinal tuberculosis, while the tuberculosis of peritoneum accounts only for about the 30 to 35% of the cases. So TB of the mesenteric and the retroperitoneal lymph nodes account for 15 to 20%, and tuberculosis of liver and pancreas spleen is only 1% or less. So that's why the most of the cases of the GI tuberculosis is mainly involving the gastrointestinal tract followed by the peritoneum. Okay, so peritoneum. So what are the symptoms of the gastrointestinal tuberculosis? The patient can present with a weight loss. There can be abdominal pain. Patient can have a diarrhea. Patient can have a malabsorption, and intermittent constipation associated with the worsening of the pain appear the most common presenting features in Nepalese context. So, and fever is absent in majority of the cases or maybe slight, and abdominal mass in around 20 to 25%, and the patient can present with a dysenteric syndrome, like loose stools mixed with blood and mucus, and associated with the lower abdominal cramps. And there can be a formation of non-healing anorectal fissures. Okay, so that's another one. And the painful nodular perianal lesions or fistulas can be found in the patient is if involved with the gastrointestinal tuberculosis. So these are the symptoms and the features of the patient. So coming to the clinical features of extrapulmonary TB, so pleural, if it is a pleural, effusion and involvement of pleura, so patient can have a pleuritic chest pain, shortness of breath, and effusion are mainly unilateral, and the lymphatic. The most common site of extrapulmonary disease usually presents as a painless swelling, most commonly in the neck, and any nodes can be involving of any nodes. Okay, so this is nodes. Okay, not nodes. Adenopathy usually occurs in the single lymph node or chin, while in the CNS system, as already told, is mainly a headache, altered mental status, nausea, and vomiting if the patient is present, and then the patient have a meningeal signs in the form of neck rigidity, and there can be the involvement of cranial nerves like oculomotor nerve, paralysis of oculomotor nerve leading to strabismus or ptosis, drooping of eyelids, floppy eyelids, and sometimes convulsions can be there because of the involvement tuberculoma. And And then the patient has a bone and joint, many affects spine, most commonly affects spine, and then the form by the weight bearing joint, like hip joint, the another involvement of most commonly involved joint. And insidious onset of joint pain and swelling. Involvement of cervical vertebra may signal to the presence by the pain in the neck and shoulders. It may lead to the rigidity of the neck. A cervical cold abscess can be there behind the sternocleidomastoid muscles, and more rarely neurological signs leading to progressive tetraplegia, that is quadriplegia, can be there if there is a involvement of cervical vertebra was there. And involvement of dorsal vertebra is indicated by localized back pain, deformity of the spine, and the extreme cases and angulated kyphosis, that is known as a gibbous. Okay, so gibbous, the chief risk is the spinal cord compression, and the patient can present with a lower limb weakness, that is known as a bilateral lower limb weakness, that is known as a paraplegia. So genitourinary, patient can have a flank pain, hematuria, recurrent urinary tract infection, pyuria will be there. And on the abdominal exam, tuberculosis, the abdominal pain and swelling, abdominal tenderness, ascites will be there. And if the patient has a disseminated tuberculosis, the clinical signs, general deterioration, high fever, and dyspnea can be there, and other organs which is affected like pleural effusion, digestive problems, hepatitis splenomegaly, and sometimes the meningeal signs is also there in the patient who is have a disseminated disease. Okay, so this is the clinical features of the extrapulmonary tuberculosis. So coming to the diagnosis of tuberculosis, so this is also a box which is taken from your Davidson. So the specimen required is mainly a pulmonary. For the pulmonary, the sputum is the one. If the patient is not able to expectorate, then you can use the induced sputum with a nebulized hypertonic saline. And still the patient is not expectorating, then you can go for the bronchoscopy with washing or bronchoalveolar lavage. And if they, in the case of children, so there is a high chance of swelling in the sputum, so that's why we are going for the gastric washing, mainly used for the children. Then coming to the extrapulmonary tuberculosis, the fluid examination, the patient, we are going to do the cerebrospinal CSF, ascitic fluid analysis, pleural fluid analysis, pericardial and joint fluid, and then the yield is classically very low. Tissue biopsy from the affected site, bone marrow, liver, may be the diagnostic in disseminated disease. And the another thing that you are going to do is a Montu test, that is a tuberculosis skin test. It's a low sensitivity and specificity, usually only in the primary or deep-seated infection. The stain that you are going to use is a Jetin stain and rhodamin fluorescence stain. And then another is a PCR, that is nucleic acid amplification. Culture, you can use the solid media like Lowenstein Jensen and Middlebrook. Whereas the liquid media, we are going to use the Bactec or MGIT. Okay, so MGIT, these are the liquid media. So in the liquid media, we are going to culture very fast than comparing to the solid medias. And then the pleural fluid, you can look for the ADA. So that's known as the adenosine deaminase, and response to the empirical treatments that you can also look, but ideally it is not done. Okay, so and then the baseline blood test that you can do is the full blood count. You can do the CRP and ASR as the reactive acute phase reactant, and urea and creatinine and electrolytes to look for starting the drugs. Okay, and the LFTs also to look for the early involvement on the liver or not, and also for starting the drugs, because all the drugs which are going to act is mainly liver toxic except ethambutol and estreptomycin in the first line treatment. Okay, so this is how you are going for the diagnostic test for the tuberculosis. So these are the technologies which you can use. Smear microscopic is mainly by the microscope. So this is the gold standard if you are finding the bacilli. And the another is a nucleic acid test, then in the form of GeneXpert, MTB or REEF, based on GeneXpert technology you are going to use. So this is mainly available, and also it helps them to drug sensitivity test to find out can detect the rifampicin resistance. And for liquid cultures that we can do is a Bactec and MGIT, and another one that we are now going to do is a line probe assay. So LPA. So LPA is a PCR-based test used for diagnosis of TB for determining the susceptibility to the different anti-TB drugs. So first line LPA includes the ionized rifampicin susceptibilities, whereas second line LPA includes fluoroquinolones and injectable anti-TB drugs like aminoglycoside and polypeptide susceptibilities. So LPA needs higher bacterial load in samples than for the expert MTB or REEF for the positive. Okay, so now we are using both line probe and GeneXpert as in the patient with a retreatment case. Okay, so if you are finding the patient having thinking of the resistant TB, then for rifampicin you can send for gene expert, and for the INH we have to do for Line-Pro-VAC. Okay, so Line-Pro-VAC. So this is the thing that has to be also be added now. So this is how you are going to take the sputum. Okay, so the instruction to be given to the patient. Okay, so then take the water and then take the deep breath and पिठ्युमा बिस्तारै थमथमाउने, and then after that खोक्न लाउने, त्यसपछि 1 घण्टापछि फेरि again you are going to collect the sputum. So this is how you are going to collect the two samples in the same day. And so sputum microscopy should know about what is 1+ and what is 2+ and what is 3+. Okay, so AFP, so 1+ is 10 to 99, 100 to 999, and then the 1000. So this is how you are going to do the test. So I am concluding the today's lecture on this slide. Okay, so on the next class we are going with the DOTS regimen, so and the MDR TB regimen and new TB guidelines. What is the treatment options for the tuberculosis, to conclude the lecture on the tuberculosis. So okay, with this I am concluding. So wishing you all happy TR to all the students. And so we'll going to have a next lecture on next Tuesday. So there must be a ward living or theory examination, most likely starting from the 14th of November. So जे पढ्या छ, जे लेक्चर भएको छ त्यसको क्वेशन चाहिँ आउँछ है लेक्चर थ्योरीमा for you, for the information. अहिलेसम्म जे हुन्छ next week all will be included in the theory examination.
No,
any
sir.
questions?
Thank you, sir. And you too, happy.
Thank you. Hi, so safe. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.